Cleanup on aisle Schumer. Fallout continues from the Democrat food fight over who's their leader, who's in charge, and where the party's going. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the dark money groups that are continuing to interrupt town halls, and so much more today on 10-Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
When we last spoke, we were talking about Chuck Schumer's efforts to clean up the mess he had made by making the responsible decision to keep the government funded, as Democrats had begun launching attacks at him from all over the place. But he began his tour making a mistake by going on The View.
I made my money all by myself. How dare your government take my money from me? I don't want to pay taxes.
What Chuck Schumer just said there about people wanting to keep their own money will be used in ads against Democrats in the midterm cycle. But it's also a really important reminder of how Democrats feel entitled to your hard-earned money. But one of the more interesting clips in the interview with The View was Sonny Huston, in a rare moment of clarity, pushing back on Chuck Schumer.
I think you caved. I think you and 9 other Democrats caved. I don't think you showed the fight that this party needs right now.
In another interview, Chuck Schumer talked about the ideal vibe and environment for negotiating with Republicans.
I am hopeful that our Republican colleagues will resume working with us. And I talked to them. One of the places I told them to go in the gym, you know, when you're on that bike in your shorts, panting away next to a Republican, a lot of the inhibitions come off.
I'm sorry you had to see that, but if we did, I wanted you to as well. One of the most other interesting clips that really stuck out to me personally was Schumer talking about his own masterful craft in winning Democrat seats.
One of the things I am known to be very good at is how to win Senate seats. In other words, I'm a strategist in terms of recruiting candidates, helping the candidates run campaigns and win it.
This one is particularly notable because Chuck Schumer just lost a number of major seats and the Democrat majority because he bet on really bad candidates like former Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey. Lastly, Chuck Schumer talked about the role of oligarchs and how Republicans are just looking out for millionaires. We're going to get to that in a little bit, but as we talk about these oligarchs, I want to look at the dark money groups that are funding these protests at town hall events. Just on Tuesday night, Mike Flood, representative from Nebraska, held a town hall. It was interesting to see just how much media was there and just how much attention was there. There were chants of "Tax the rich." It's Nebraska. If you hear "Tax the rich" chants in Nebraska, you gotta ask, is this real? Next, they chanted anger and animosity at trimming the size of the federal government, again, in Nebraska. And then later, someone even raised their hand to ask Representative Flood why Elon Musk was better at reducing the size and scope of government than the inspectors general, whose job that was. Which my response would have been, these same inspectors general who warned for months that Joe Biden's spending programs were full of waste, fraud, and abuse, those inspectors general. But when you look a little bit deeper and when you follow the money, as a great Fox report that just came out on Wednesday morning did, it's easy to see how much dark money involvement was at play here. First, there's a group called More Perfect Union, funded, you guessed it, by George Soros and run by Bernie Sanders' former campaign manager, who helped organize this event, advertise for it, and then promoted and live tweeted the event.
How can you be against a balanced budget?
Groups like Move On and Indivisible, who we've talked about before in this program, funded by left-wing billionaires like George Soros, not only advertised the town hall, trying to encourage their volunteers to get there to hold Mike Flood accountable, but Fox was able to track down Reddit threads showing the coordination to live tweet this to try and create a narrative, once again, that there's massive pushback happening at these town halls that everybody should clue into. Now, unfortunately, a lot of mainstream media that covers this isn't really willing to follow the money or to try and find a thread. They go to a town hall in a place like Nebraska, hear "Tax the rich," and don't think anything of it. But as you follow the money, you see the threads are there both in organizing, trying to facilitate large groups of Democrat activists to come to these events, the media moments where they capture this, everyone is live tweeting the same things. When you look at who is live tweeting these in the moment and you recognize the fact that clearly a bat signal has gone out, and you have people like Vox's Aaron Rupar, who is always live tweeting every Democrat event that happens. A Twitter account called Democrat Wins Media that has been built exclusively to live tweet content for Democrats. But even groups like Climate Defiance, these are the people that stop traffic in the road and glue themselves to tennis courts about climate change. And I don't know if those people would be super popular in Nebraska, but they're helping organize and create moments out of town halls in these red districts and states to try and create a moment there. And I think it's so important to peel back those layers, follow the money, and determine what's organic and what's not. And as they chant things like tax the rich, and as people like Chuck Schumer and Tim Walz and others try and make the argument that Republicans are just looking out for billionaires, it's so important to look at who really has done more to help the rich these last few years. First, the student loan debt bailout, where President Biden tried to bail out the student debt of American people, primarily benefited wealthy earners. It primarily benefited people who have law school student debt, medical school student debt, and higher income potential than anybody else. That's why this was such an absurd heist, and polling showed that the more people got to know about who this was going to benefit, the less they supported it. The second thing that Joe Biden did was the EV tax credits, an entire tax credit agenda that disproportionately benefited people who were already well off. They raised the thresholds that made those tax credits available to people so high that you had people making 3 to 5 times the median income in the United States buying EVs with our tax dollars. And they weren't buying them to turn in an old clunker or something that was a high emissions vehicle. They were buying EVs to park next to their Escalades. The third thing that Joe Biden and Democrats did that I think is so inflammatory is how they wrote the Inflation Reduction Act. The Associated Press, Brian Slodisco, a reporter that nobody would ever claim is conservative, did a deep dive report on this and showed the process of Biden donors all the way back in 2020 who were allowed to be involved in the process of drafting the Inflation Reduction Act, who then invested heavily in the same kind of green energy companies, then made billions of dollars off of it. There's one person reported in this that has previously described being involved in helping Chuck Schumer write bills, who the day Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin held their secret negotiations, gave $2.5 million to Chuck Schumer and also began investing heavily in First Solar. First Solar eventually became the #1 recipient of Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. And they multiplied in value, and they got more than $10 billion from those tax credits. And when you talk about who really is trying to help the rich here, who really is corrupt, who's passing tax cuts for billionaires, it's very easy to see it's Democrats under Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer. And right now we are having an interesting debate about extending the Trump tax cuts. Every piece of data from 2017 shows that those tax cuts helped everybody up and down the tax ladder. Even the lowest income people benefited in some way. And as we talk about extending that, the Democrats are framing that again as tax cuts for the rich, even though we know there's so much data showing that that will help even the poorest of Americans get some benefit at a time when they really need it. And so as they try and fight that and try and block the extension of that tax cut, Democrats have the opportunity right now within about a 3-year period to pass one of the biggest tax cuts, wealth transfers to the wealthy in the history of our country through the Inflation Reduction Act and Biden spending bills, but then also raise taxes on the poorest Americans by blocking the extension of those tax cuts that will help them. In 3 years, they can be responsible for doing all of that. What a party. Today's You Can't Make It Up segment is one that I'm very passionate about. President Trump spent the first week of his administration heavily focused on dismantling woke ideology, things like DEI, things like gender ideology, both in government but also in corporate America. And that set off a mad dash of companies trying to get rid of those programs. Most of them had wanted to do that anyways because they know that they're net losers and they know their PR liabilities. 2 stories came on Tuesday that I think highlight the interesting dynamics of this. First, University of Florida Southern was caught in part because an executive went and spoke at a conference at Virginia Commonwealth University and gave a presentation about how he had evaded these executive orders in both federal and state laws in Florida about ending DEI. And he literally made a PowerPoint presentation showing how they had avoided the law, how they had navigated around it, broke the law, and continued to do DEI by naming it something else. As of that story breaking within a couple hours, he is no longer with the university. The other story was Vanderbilt University. They have been found to have massive tranches and curriculum of DEI, of different departments that are heavily focused on DEI, the political agendas that come with that. They have password protected those, not deleted them, not removed them, just simply put passwords on them. What these organizations are doing is putting the now illegal DEI programs, the woke programs, into storage, waiting until time passes, just like putting a car in the garage until a storm passes, with the hope that someday a Democrat comes into office and they can wheel all of this right back out and go back to doing their divisive political, putting, divisive agendas ahead of serving their customers. That's why nobody can take their feet off the gas on this really, really important issue. Thank you so much for joining us today on 10 Minute Drill. It's been a blast. Please subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you're following us on every podcast platform. Have a great day.